everybody. You're very welcome to a new episode of Redefining Cybersecurity. I am Sean Martin, your host, where I get to talk about all kinds of cool things cyber connected to the business. And of course, not just by myself, with some really cool people who have some great experiences in this space. And I don't know much, which is why I talk to people who know other things than me. And we're going to spend some time today talking about the world of cybersecurity startups and kind of where things are headed there. And I'm thrilled to have Ross on with me. Ross, you're an author, an investor, fellow podcaster. I'm thrilled to have you on the show. Maybe a few words for folks about who you are and what you've been up to lately.
Yeah, super happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. Yes, so I am many things, but first and foremost, I'm an operator. I'm a builder. I have been building products, including cybersecurity products, for well over a decade. And what I find different about cybersecurity is just the passion that people bring to the table. I've worked across several different industries before. I've worked in retail, wholesale, financial technology for a number of years, and in no other space have I seen so much energy and so many people dedicating their free time to push the industry forward and to make things better. So I'm insanely passionate about cybersecurity. Several years ago, I started a blog called Venture Insecurity. And the goal at the time was to cover the business side, like the market side, the startup side of the cybersecurity space. The blog took off, and everything else that unfolded was sort of a continuation of that work on a blog. I then ended up publishing a book and so on and so forth. But fundamentally, I'm a builder. Like career-wise, I was a product manager, head of product for a number of years, and now I'm in the middle of launching my own thing, but still within cybersecurity and still focusing on building products.
Yeah, super fun, and we can go all over the place with this conversation on building stuff. Quickly, your book is interesting to me as well. Give me an overview of what that is, and perhaps we have a separate conversation on that. But let's a quick word on that.
The core thesis is that there are plenty of fantastic books about how to do security, how to reduce risk, how to run security programs, be it vulnerability management, endpoint security, or whatnot. But the gap that I have realized existed was the gap around helping people understand what are some of the business aspects of building cybersecurity startups, and also what are the different parts of the ecosystem. When we say cybersecurity, in my mind, there are two ways of defining cybersecurity. On one way, there is the cybersecurity as a practice, right? Where we have a bunch of security practitioners and security leaders in their organizations doing their best in order for them to secure the environments of the companies they work for, or consumer space, like people trying to secure their own data. And then there is another way of looking at the security space, and it's saying that there is, I guess, the other aspect is cybersecurity as an industry, where we have an ecosystem of different players, right? We have startups, we have established companies, we have resellers, distributors, MSSPs, we have industry analysts, we have podcasts, for the lack of better example. And like we have all of those bits and pieces. We have events such as RSA and Black Hat and others, and we have all of those components sort of interacting and coexisting together, complementing one another. That is also where a lot of the money is exchanged, right? If you're a security practitioner, you're not thinking about the flows of capital, you're thinking about security. If you, however, are on the industry side, you're thinking about go-to-market, you're thinking about marketing, you're thinking about sales, you're thinking about fundraising, you're thinking about exits. And so that was security as an industry was the area of focus for the blog. And then obviously it evolved into security as an industry and also building security products for the book. So the book is precisely about that. If you are a security practitioner and you're interested in maybe launching a side project or maybe building something on the side or maybe starting your own company, that's the right book to read. If you are somebody who is more interested in how to do security, that is not the right book to read, although still probably useful.
There's never a bad thing to learn different aspects of how all this stuff works. But great overview, and we'll see. I'd love to have you back, and we can talk a little bit more about the book and what that looks like. But I think where I want to start, I know we have a few points we want to cover, but kind of this idea that I think you just touched on, which is if you're a practitioner and you're thinking about a side project, it's probably because you're dealing with something in the world that you live in where there's a gap, right? And you think perhaps others are experiencing the same gap, and therefore, if I can close this gap, maybe it'll help more than just myself. Um, because I know one of the things we want to talk about is kind of the past and present of cybersecurity venture and startups. And I'll go back to I'm a builder as well. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time here, but 30 years ago, building products with Peter Norton Group as part of Symantec, purpose built to solve a problem around viruses, right? And then viruses morphed, and we end up where we are today. But the whole point is that that was a market problem that was defined and a product built for that. Where what I just described in connection to what you said is perhaps an operational problem that needs to be solved in the cyberspace. Um, Maybe better detection, but probably more likely, uh, yeah, a gap in how to get from detection to response faster, for response to recovery faster, recovery to um, better protection faster. So I guess I'm rambling here now, but your thoughts on startups? Another way to look at it is, are they products or are they features that get acquired and been built into other products? So I'll stop rambling, but your thoughts on kind of the state of cybersecurity startups and how they're kind of driven, I guess, is really what I'm after.
Yeah, there are definitely a few aspects that I would mention. One is that obviously from the startup perspective, cybersecurity is a quote unquote a hot space, right? Everybody is trying to build something, trying to solve problems, and quite often in an industry. We get into this thought process of saying, "Oh my God, there are just too many tools, too many products, and too many vendors, and this and that." But I think that fundamentally, if you don't look at the number of companies, but instead, like if you talk to the individual founders and people who are trying to pursue the solutions to those problems, you will find that the vast majority, like the overwhelming majority, are driven by the right things. They're driven by the desire to solve problem. And some of them have experienced that problem when they were working as a security practitioner on a security team at a large enterprise. Others were maybe building something in the open source, and they found that, hey, this problem actually resonates with other people, and there is a way to achieve scale by trying to to get this solution touch as many potential customers as possible. Somebody else maybe have served in the military, and they were on the cyber offense or cyber defense side, and they've seen what types of distractions can be caused by the security incidents, and using cybersecurity as as one of the types of warfare. And so people come at it from different angles. Like somebody was maybe a CISO, but for the most part, with some exceptions, of course there are always exceptions, but for the most part, people come at it with with an open heart and a passion for solving a problem. And the reason I'm talking about this is because there's often this assumption that we're making that, oh my God, like every founder is just in there for money. Well, the reality is that the vast majority of cybersecurity startups fail, right? As every other startup. So if you're chasing money, there are probably much more certain ways of of getting paid, such as joining a large corporation and maybe getting to a certain rank. Now, the number of tools out there is a lot. Like that is just undeniable. That said, it's interesting to view it through the lenses of the technology space in general, not just through the lenses of security. Because you see, depending on which angle you take, like which angle or which vantage point you look at it from, your conclusion is going to be very different. If you were a security practitioner for the past 15 years or 20 years, and you still remember the time when cybersecurity was really about having a firewall and an antivirus, then obviously having to deal with like 75 tools in your environment is a lot. And if you've been a part of that evolution in the market, you're most definitely going to be upset about where we ended up as an industry. Now, I'll give you a different perspective. I've worked in the financial technology space before. And when I was in fintech, we also complained about the number of vendors. But let me tell you, we had over 50 or 60,000 vendors. So that is how many fintech tools are there. If you look at something like marketing tools, like the tools used by marketing teams, it's the exact same number, 50 to 60,000 plus. If you look at HR tools like human resources, the exact same number. So yes, cybersecurity is certainly a crowded space, but it has nothing to do with security being a crowded space. It is more that we, as the technology ecosystem, have democratized access to entrepreneurship. Like 20 years ago, how many people could even start a company? How many people could raise capital? How many people could take a stab at solving different problems? The only way for you to solve problems was to start something in open source on the side, keep your day job, and then hope that maybe somebody else will find what you're doing useful. Today, starting companies it's a profession on its own, and that's why there are many companies out there.
Yeah. Well, let's see. You touched on something that was in my head, and since you mentioned, I want to spend a moment here, especially when you spoke to fintech and how many companies there are and tools there are, and marketing, how many companies and tools there are. Those are driven by business need, and as the business accepts that and tries to grow the business and expand their market share and do cool things and serve the customers better, and they use all these tools to do that, guess what happens, right? More exposure, more risk, more attack surface, more attackers, more need for security tooling. So I think it because I have a feeling that a lot of people think, to your point, people are trying to make money, people are trying to be clever and build new products and find a way to solve a specific problem. But it's because the business drove this need to, drove the risk exposure and therefore the need to shore things up. So I don't know, your experience with security founders kind of connecting to that in any way, or what do you think?
I think, at the end of the day, it always comes down to business, right? Yes, there is this like altruistic way of looking at the cybersecurity space and saying that we are defending, the society. But let's be honest, we are defending the kind of organizations that are paying our salaries. And sadly, it's often even not the kind of organizations that need support the most. Right? Because as people, as individuals, we have to be pragmatic. We have to think about our families. We have to think about our personal goals and plans, and we have to balance that against our desire to do something for the greater good. And maybe working for a utilities company is that the definition of that greater good, or maybe helping a nonprofit to defend, data of people who donate money to their cause, or maybe people who benefit from their cause, is really the real definition of doing something for the greater good. But instead, the kind of companies that care about security more than others are companies in insurance space, because they're regulated, are companies in the finance space. So there's a bit of that honesty that we need to have as an industry, and just acknowledge that, yes, like we are trying to do the right things, but within the confines of what business has designed as security, as the security industry. And so in a similar way, what you were saying is absolutely spot on, right? Business operates a certain way. Business has certain goals, and those goals are typically growth and increase in shareholder value. And security is only important to the business as, like, in two ways. One, in the way in which it enables the business to operate. So if you work in a highly regulated industry and you don't have certain security program, you can have trouble staying in business, because the government will come after you, and the regulator will come after you. And that's why security is important. So it's purely the compliance aspect of it. And then on the other side, security is important as a way to protect the ability for the company to generate revenue and keep the profits. So you not only and that's another aspect of it. So as you said, it always ties back to the business. And at the end of the day, security budget is the amount of money that the business believes it should be allocating towards security while considering all the other priorities. Like if you think about it, like we often talk about security budget as a fraction of the IT budget, but I think a more honest and a more realistic way of making that evaluation is to say, to look at the security budget as a percentage of revenue or as a percentage of profit. Because if you look at it from that perspective, you realize that when a company is deciding how much money to invest into their cybersecurity program, they're not just saying, hey, are we going to invest into networking or are we going to invest into SaaS tools or security? No, their decision is, hey, are we going to pump more money into sales that can then generate more profit, or are we going to invest more into security? And that's where the math starts looking very different.
Right. Well, sales, marketing, then delivery, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's where a lot of tooling comes into play as well, unless you're building a widget. But in that case, you're talking about manufacturing, which is delivery, which also needs to be secure.
Yeah.
So from a startup perspective, then, how do you see them defining what their objectives are? Because I still, you mentioned the two that I think are still very prevalent, which is compliance, right? Those are typical drivers for sales for security products, and risk management, risk reduction, exposure reduction. I very, very seldom personally hear revenue growth, right, as a cybersecurity benefit from startups. And I don't, have we reached a point yet where we can start talking about that?
So I think the answer is yes, but it has less to do with the evolution or us getting to a certain point, and it has more to do with the fact that different companies operate under different business models and sell different things. So the way I would think about it is that business comes down, like the business objectives are always to either find way to generate as much revenue as possible, so focusing on the top line, or and avoid as many expenses as possible, so focusing on the bottom line. And so there are different types of organizations, right? There are companies companies in highly regulated industries. Like look at finance, look at healthcare, look at critical infrastructure. In those kinds of industries, the number one driver for security is the business preservation, is the ability for those companies to stay in business, right? If they're not compliant, the regulator is going to come after them. Now, that is interestingly enough, those companies are probably the biggest buyers of the cybersecurity tooling, but they're not the biggest percentage if you look at the market. Like the regulated industries is still a limited number of sectors and segments. Now, there is also a category of companies for whom compliance and security are self-enablement tools. And this mainly applies to tech companies, right? If I am going to, let's just say I'm an enterprise and I'm considering using, I don't know, Dropbox or Box or some other data storage solution, for example, I very much want to make sure that the customers are going to be comfortable sharing their data with me or embedding my software into their organization. And in order for me to do it, I need to give them the peace of mind that I am going to be a secure solution. So I'm going to keep their data secure. I'm not going to cause a supply chain risk, unnecessary supply chain risks in their environment. And so for the technology vendors, cybersecurity is one of the core attributes of the product they're selling. And that's why when you go, like when you look at Bay Area companies, when you look at like a lot of the really technology SaaS solutions, there is so much investment into security, at least comparably to companies in other industries. And that's also depending which CISO is on a panel or which CISO is giving a talk about security. You may get a very different perspective, right? Because if I am buying a sofa from a furniture manufacturer, I honestly couldn't care less what kind of data data loss prevention tools they have in place or what's their security program. Like I'm getting a sofa, like I'm getting the end product. And ironically, Neither do their partners or customers, right? Like their suppliers are probably are used to getting their data lost left and right. Again, I'm not saying that that's the right way to approach it, but it's more like the reality of the space. Now, if I am buying milk, do I really care about, whether or not a milk facility has the right insider threat program? I mean, I hope it's going to be the safe milk to drink, but I don't care about their security posture. Now, if I am using Google's cloud storage for my personal data and my personal documentation, I very much care about their security posture because that's the security of my data. And so I think that that's what different motivations for security really come down to. Because if you are a manufacturing facility, what do you care about? You care about making sure that all of your machinery is going to be operational and working regardless what happens. So you care about things like ransomware. You care about things like just business continuity, but you don't really care as much about data loss prevention. If you're a technology company, you care about uptime, most certainly, but you also care about, especially if you are in the B2B space, you care about data protection for your customers. And your customers are actually going to ask you, hey, what are you doing around security? And you will show them something like SOC 2 to at least, again, not an ideal answer, but it at least gives people an idea of what you could be doing, of what you say you're doing. So I think the answer isn't like, just coming full circle back to your question, it's not that there are some companies that are more mature than others, and that's why they treat security as self-enablement. It's more that if you are in the business where the customer that's paying you money cares about your security posture, then security becomes self-enablement. That is, realistically speaking, really just the technology space. The moment you get outside of the technology space, if you're an oil production facility, people care about oil. They don't care about, what it's up to you to make sure that you continue making money. So it then becomes about protecting the ability to make money, but it's not about protecting the data.
And the one area I'll push back, and I'll use so I'll connect your milk example to eggs. And sadly, the supply chain of eggs has been impacted by a disease.
Yes,
it could very easily be impacted by a technological issue like feed supply or movement of food, or I don't know. I'm stretching a little bit here, but I guess the whole point is, at the end of the day, it's not, to your point that you made earlier as well, it's not just about data protection, though that may have a role in what I'm about to say. It's really about resilience, right? The business needs to be resilient. And in the case of the eggs, maybe the producers, granted, they don't want to lose their chickens and not sell as many eggs. Yes, they're going to suffer, but ultimately it's the society that suffers if we don't protect the ecosystem and the supply chain. That's, I guess, my point that I'm making.
Oh, I agree. You see, I'm not at all saying that this way of approaching security is the right way. What I am, however, saying is that if you're a business, like, let's think about it from the business standpoint. If you're a business and you have a prospect doing a POC, and if the POC closes, you stand to make $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million. It doesn't matter. You name it, wherever an impressive number it is for you. Now, if that prospect comes to you and says, I'm willing to sign on the dotted line and we can start working together, but I need you to comply with this like 4 requirements, that is a real motivator for the company to invest money into complying. Now, if, however, I am a company that is doing well and we are selling eggs, let's continue with your example. It's much harder for me. Like, let's just say I'm an executive sitting in a boardroom and people talk about how we should allocate our investment for the next year. It's much harder for me to say that, you know what, we should probably invest into this new security capability over investing into market expansion. And it's not because that's objectively the better way of allocating capital. It's more that we as humans are pretty bad at evaluating risk. we're good at evaluating opportunity. If there is $5 million in front of us and all we need is a SOC 2 report, we're going to get that SOC 2 done. But trying to predict, like, hey, what are the chances that something bad is going to happen to my business next year? And should I be preparing to it? And if so, how much should I be allocating to prepare for it? We're just bad at that. And that's why sales enablement has always been a stronger motivator than loss prevention.
Yeah. Sad, I'm afraid it'll continue that way. I want to, so I partly brought up the egg thing just so we could have this exchange, but also to make a point that I think we have an opportunity to learn from the good things other industries have done, the lack of good things other industries have done. So I want to go back to your fintech example, where you describe a world of countless tools and products and services, and financial companies seem to have found a way to deal with that. So I'm wondering if there's any enlightening moments from your experience working in that space to say, here's how fintech found its way into financial institutions successfully, that people aren't yelling and screaming and saying their hair's on fire all the time, like I think we do kind of in security.
Yeah, sadly, I'm not going to have a good answer. And there is a very specific reason why that is the case. You see, there is like security is a very unique industry in several aspects, but one of which it is unique is the fact that in security, there isn't a pool for products. There is more a push for products. So let me explain. If I am a finance team, the number of problems I need to solve is finite, right? I have a certain types of work that I need to do, and some of it is probably manual. So I'm going to have a very specific solution I'm looking for, and I'll go to the market, and I'm not going to be evaluating all the tools. I'm just going to be evaluating the tools that I actually care about for my specific use case, knowing that the rest I'm consciously choosing to ignore because, yeah, we could use it, but like we're probably good with what we've got. Now, security is quite different in that I'm not just going to the market to choose the stuff I think I need. I'm also going to the market to learn what else can fail in my environment. Because like in finance, you're solving a problem, and if you don't have a tool for something, you're still doing that something, just doing it manually, doing it differently, like maybe spending more time, but it's up to you to decide. Now in security, it's the attacker that decides what you need. It's not your behavior, it's the attacker behavior that actually decides what you need, and you don't know how attackers are going to behave today, 3 months from now, 6 months from now. So it's almost one of those areas where you will never know what you need. You will never know how much you need, and you're looking for clues, right? You're going and you're asking analyst firms like, hey, what should I be looking at? You're going and asking your peers as a security leaders like, hey, what are some of the areas that you're looking at? Like, what's important? You're reading the news. Oh, what are attackers doing? What should I be preparing my organization to? So you're almost like always living in this like partly fear, but partly fear of missing out, right? You're like, oh my God, if I don't have this new capability, is that gonna cause an issue 7 months down the road, a year and a half down the road? You never know. In fintech, it's different. Like if you believe that this is not the problem you're going to solve, then you just don't solve that problem. Now, over the long term, that may set you back compared to your peers. That may become a competitive disadvantage if you are not as efficient in some areas as you know your competitors. But at the end of the day, it's never like, hey, on this day you're going to fail because your defenses have failed. It's a very different buying behavior.
Yeah, I can totally see that and appreciate that. And I'm glad you pointed that out. I'm also thinking one layer up though. So regardless of how it enters, whether it's a pull in or a push in, are there similarities or differences or maybe lessons we can learn with respect to how that stuff is managed in terms of the infrastructure, Because in your scenario of the pull, it's many department, maybe even more complex, yet somehow they figure it out, right? Versus one coming in through security. I
You
don't know.
see, I think as a security industry, we should be better, and I think we have been becoming better consistently over the past number of years at pushing vendors to integrate more with other solutions on the market. Like there was the time when you would come to a vendor and you would essentially not just buy into that vendor, but you would also buy into the ecosystem of other solutions that they work with. And if they don't have an integration with this other tool that you've got in your environment, that was your problem. Like the vendor was not going to build. Right. I think now we have gotten to the point where there is a good understanding that capabilities should be more or less interchangeable. They should be interoperable. They should be integrated. And so if I am buying a certain solution, I should be able to connect it to all of the other tools in my environment so that it can all work as a part of the cohesive fabric, as opposed to this standalone thing that I can't connect to and it's just sitting there and hopefully doing something to keep me more secure. So I think that as an industry, we've been fairly good at pushing vendors to evolve. And you can see the evolution. Like you can see that at this day and age, when new vendors, when new solutions are starting out, they're fairly open when it comes to their APIs. They're fairly open when it comes to the ability to add new integrations and so on and so forth. I think that's important. It's also important to push vendors to offer a much more user-friendly experience for the buyers. Right? In many industries, like I was honestly shocked when I ended up in cybersecurity. I was shocked by how far security vendors are, how far behind the security vendors are when it comes to their user experience, their offer. It's absolutely insane. Like you see, like you are in the world in which it takes me like 5 minutes to get started with something like Asana, with something like even like a tool for filing my personal taxes, or a tool for doing taxes for my corporation. Like it takes me minutes to get started with that. It's easy, it's user friendly. It can take me many months to get started with the security product or even understand how it works. Again, buyers have to vote with their dollars and choose products that are more user friendly compared to others. So I think there is a lot of that process of just pushing the players in the market to transform and do better that needs to happen, and it is happening.
And you touch on another point that's been on my mind as we've been talking as well, is just security so not security that plays well with, but perhaps security in the ecosystem and in the infrastructure. And I remember, I don't know, it's probably been 15, maybe even, it's probably at least 15, maybe 20 years ago now. There was a movement for banks to embed security into the browser that they would deliver to their customers to protect their customers and ultimately their transactions that they were doing on behalf of their customers. So it seemed very interesting to me that banks would deliver this browsing capability with security built in. Now, obviously, it didn't take off because people want to use their own browser, not the bank's one. So I guess my question to you is from a startup perspective, are we looking enough at that? Or are we still looking at, and maybe to your point, you just said it, right? We're still ages behind in terms of adoption and the ability and ease of use to get into this. But is there an opportunity to do better at getting deeper into the infrastructure and become part of it and not just something that security tacks on to the side when a business team says we're deploying this new tech and now we need to secure it?
No, I do agree. I think there is the philosophical conversation, and then there is the startup related conversation, and they're going to be quite different.
Right.
Because philosophically, the answer is most certainly yes. But the reason why it is not the same if you take the startup lenses is because as a startup, like if you are 5 people in a garage, or I think the times for to talk about garage are over. Like now there is certainly less of those teams working from a garage. But the part that matters is that if you're a startup, you don't really have the ability to change the way a certain ecosystem works. What you have very little resources, you have a lot of passion, and you have the ability to execute and move fast. So you, as a startup, you have to find an initial entry point, and that entry point has to be pretty scoped down. It has to be fairly specific. And that is why when a lot of the people complain about point solutions, what they miss is the understanding that every platform, every solution that we call a platform, started as a point solution. Because you have to start somewhere, right? If you're going to build a house, you're not going to build like 65 rooms at once. You have to start with some foundation. And if you want that house to be livable, like in 3 months, then you better just build one room, and then you expand into building other rooms. I know it's a very stupid example, but at the end of the day, as a startup, you have to find your initial wedge, and you have to find that initial use case to build around. And so now, going back full circle, yes, we should be doing better as the technology ecosystem, but the reality is that the power to do better is not in the hands of startups. It is in the hands of companies that are providing that infrastructure, right? If I'm a cloud provider, I most certainly have a better ability to secure the infrastructure that I'm providing than a startup that's trying to build some point solution on top of that infrastructure and tack it on. Like if I am a mobile phone manufacturer and the OS manufacturer, I can most certainly provide a better mobile phone security than a third party building an app for mobile security. Or if I am well, we say endpoint, but really, like if I am building PCs and workstations, I can most certainly provide better security. In theory, I can most certainly provide better security than a third party. In practice, though, what ends up happening is that if security is not your core area of focus, you obviously don't pay as much attention to it, and then there comes another vendor, and because that is their only area of focus, they have to be good at that. And so you end up with this very interesting dynamics. But I think the meta point is that I think we as an industry have been much better at improving. I think something that I don't see being discussed often enough is that we have achieved a lot as an industry over the past 3 decades. Like the CISO role itself is only like 30 years old. Like that's how many years did we actually have CISOs? Steve Katz, who was the first CISO at Citicorp. Cybersecurity has become a board level concern. We have evolved, like we have retrofitted a lot of the insecure infrastructure with new, more secure versions and equivalents that are actually solving a lot of the problems that were not solved like 10, 20 years ago. Like there's just so much that we have been doing, and I think we have to give ourselves credit for that.
Yeah, so it's a great point, and so many things in my mind here as we're chatting. Yeah, because I think that there's a company, I won't mention their name because I'm not advertising for them, but they build specifically for the SAP environment. So they're all about assessing the risk and looking at the policies and looking at the configurations and looking at controls such that SAP administrators get the value of security built in the environment they're familiar with, kind of to your point. Now, maybe SAP is not a 5-minute install, but my point is security is built into the environment the user is already experienced with.
Yeah.
And the security team is working with that team. So to me, that's a really, really cool example of stuff being built in. We have a few minutes left here. We've kind of looked at operations and business and security startups. I want to speak to the audience directly here with security practitioners and security leaders and business leaders trying to manage risk for their company. How should they look at this cybersecurity startup world? You said put your money where your mouth is, choose the technologies and the companies that are going to work best for you. How do they decipher what that is, what those things are for them?
Look, I think that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what a security leader is choosing. What matters is that no matter what choice they make, it's going to come with trade-offs, and it's going to come with pros and cons, right? There are advantages and there are disadvantages of working with early stage startups. That there are plenty of both, right? On the advantages side, early stage startups give people a much greater ability to actually influence the roadmap and co-create solutions that fit their needs and their environments much better than large established vendors. They are much more responsive. So when it comes to providing customer support, when it comes to resolving bugs, making changes to the product, like, they are going to be on top of it. And if a security leader makes a request for a new capability, they're most likely going to get it 3 days later, not 17 months later, not a year and a half, but 3 days. They're nimble, they're agile. They tend to have much more modern product experiences, modern infrastructure. They often are substantially cheaper than the incumbents because they are trying to still define the niche. And there are plenty of great ways and great reasons to work with startups. Now, that also comes at a cost, right? Startups, like many startups, lack consistency when it comes to their product roadmap and product focus. So it's not entirely unheard of for a startup to start in one area and then pivot or evolve into a completely different solution that is not at all in alignment with what that one initial customer have signed up for when they signed their contract. There is that risk 100%. Not every startup has the ability to execute predictably. Like, things change. People tend to be overly optimistic about what they can deliver, and the roadmap can change much more frequently than they anticipate. And again, many priorities, limited resources, so obviously there are trade-offs, and like in some places their solutions are not going to be great. There are trade-offs, but the same applies to working with incumbents, right? On one hand, yeah, you have very stable, very reliable, very mature product. They're much less likely to crash in the middle of some important workflow because the product has been around for a decade or two. The roadmaps are much more predictable. Their ability to execute is substantially higher. They're super slow, but they're predictable. As on the other hand, products built by those large vendors don't change as often and as much, which can be a bad thing, but it's also a great thing because you don't have to retrain your employees on how to use this product every year and a half. Now, at the same time, it comes at a bunch of downsides, right? Large companies are slow to innovate. There is a ton of needs that they just simply won't be able to address because they don't have the talent, they don't have the ability to move fast. They often struggle to attract the best talent because the coolest people want to go and build something new, oftentimes, as opposed to building something that was there 25 years ago. Unless the security leader is one of that large vendor's biggest customers, they will likely not be able to access quality support or get them to respond within 3 days instead of 16 weeks. And it can take many weeks for the vendor to resolve a bug, to address a gap in their product. And there's a lot of technical debt. So again, there are always trade-offs. The question is, what is the problem that you are trying to solve as a security leader? And what is the best solution given the trade-offs you're aware of? What is the best solution to those problems? And in my view, if you're tackling a new need, or if you have been using a well-established solution, but you're seeing the gaps, and if there is a startup that is out there promising to solve those gaps, and not just promising, but delivering on their promises and presenting something that looks compelling, that is a great case to work with that startup, assuming that the security leader cares about this specific area. Because I think what it comes down to, like at the very fundamental level, is that many security needs can be satisfied with good enough solutions. And most large vendors offer fantastic, good enough solutions, right? If you're an established vendor and you offer, a solution for XYZ, and the CISO is like, yeah, we just need some basics because that space is commoditized. They all look the same anyway. Yeah, just go with wherever is a part of the bundle. But if you care about something a lot, and if you care about having a best of breed solution for that specific area, then there is often very little choice. But it is to either work with startup instead or work in startup on top of, and find a way to bring these two worlds together. Again, I don't think there are perfect answers, but what I do think is that as an industry, we have been doing a good job at both maintaining focus on what the business needs and not going insane about just introducing 65 different startups per year to the security program, but at the same time around supporting innovation and supporting founders building something new and working with that. So if anything, I just think we need to do more of what we have already been doing. And this push on the security buyer side, this push for consolidation is the right thing to do, while keeping in mind that not everything should be consolidated and making those decisions as they come up.
Yeah. And I'll go back to, as we close here, kind of the idea of resilience as well. So either you're going to trust an entity to be resilient, or you're going to have a couple in your back pocket.
Yeah,
that'll help support you in your, because security needs to be resilient as well as the rest of the org. Well, I have a gazillion questions. We don't have time to get into all of them, so maybe we can have another chat down the road and talk about some more things. But Ross, been great having you on the show, and appreciate you sharing your insights here.
Likewise. Thank you so much for the invite. It was a fantastic conversation. Thank you, Sean.
Super fun. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this chat as well. And of course, I do ask that you share with your friends, subscribe if you like what you're hearing, and we'll see you on the next episode of Redefining Cybersecurity as we aim to do just that. Thank you all. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you.